At 16, Luren Hornck was thrown into a river by his own family. They wanted the bastard heir dead. A modern soul took over his body and unlocked a system. Every swing, every step, every kill gave him real experience points. 5 years of grinding later, he entered the Jewel Wasteland with 36 Vikings, an army of slaves, and one goal: build a domain that would make everyone who tried to kill him regret it. His journey began beside a lonely fire, far from anything resembling civilization. Luren sat on a rock while roasting one painfully small rabbit. He seasoned it with exaggerated care, pretending the miserable meal was royal cuisine. Nearby, Marco hand-fed soybeans to the horses with almost paternal tenderness. The armored giant clearly loved those animals more than most human beings. Ed, Cass, and Tom soon returned after dealing with another roadside problem. Nobody asked what happened because bandits had stopped deserving lengthy explanations. Luren handed the rabbit over to his 3 exhausted companions. They stared at the tiny carcass, then silently measured each other's hunger. One rabbit could barely satisfy a cat, much less 3 hardened soldiers. Still, no one complained, proving that discipline sometimes looked exactly like despair. Marco announced that Lotham was only an hour away. After half a month of dust and rocks, those words sounded heavenly. The men smelled terrible, slept worse, and had nearly forgotten proper food. Civilization waited ahead, along with beds, baths, supplies, and expensive problems. Lotham had originally been constructed as a fortress against the northern ORCs. Its massive walls and towers once guarded humanity from endless tribal invasions. Then imperial armies drove the ORCs onto the frozen Garash Plateau. With the immediate threat removed, the fortress transformed into a commercial center. Beyond Lotham stretched an enormous wilderness, coveted by nobles and adventurers alike. Emperor Philip III called it the jewel beneath the empire's feet. Everyone else called it the Jewel Wasteland, usually with considerably less enthusiasm. Pioneer knights entered that wilderness, seeking land, titles, glory, and impossible fortunes. Many found only hunger, native blades, and anonymous graves beneath the grass. Their failures still made Lotham rich through supplies, trade, and smuggling. The former fortress had become a marketplace, feeding every reckless frontier dream. Luren's group entered the city and immediately searched for a respectable inn. He negotiated ruthlessly until 5 travelers received 3 rooms at an acceptable price. Luren claimed the private room. Leadership required certain sacred privileges. The remaining 4 men could divide beds, floors, and blankets among themselves. After devouring real food, Luren summoned everyone for their first strategic meeting. Cass and Tom were ordered to investigate conditions inside the Jewel Wasteland. They needed accurate maps, tribal information, routes, and reports about hostile factions. Stories heard in the south had passed through too many unreliable mouths. Ed and Marco received orders to inspect markets for weapons, provisions, and slaves. Money was limited, and Luren refused to become an easy northern customer. He then headed toward the Herald's Hall to register his frontier territory. The magnificent building stood above 12 polished granite steps. Magical beasts decorated its railings while a griffin knight dominated the courtyard. The statue portrayed Emperor Philip I, founder of the current empire. Every stone quietly informed poor visitors that they did not belong there. Luren climbed the steps while rehearsing the dramatic confrontation he expected inside. He imagined an arrogant servant mocking his clothes and questioning his identity. Then Luren would reveal the gold-trimmed appointment letter and destroy that arrogance. Perhaps a table would overturn, voices would rise, and witnesses would gasp. Instead, a perfectly courteous attendant welcomed him with a warm, respectful smile. Luren felt strangely disappointed by the complete absence of humiliation. Heroes were supposed to endure disrespect before revealing their extraordinary status. Apparently, imperial bureaucracy had not studied the proper traditions of dramatic storytelling. Luren presented his appointment and identified himself as Luren Hornck. The servant checked the seal, confirmed the name, and bowed immediately. He addressed Luren as Baron and guided him through the quiet building. The meeting chamber contained a giant map covering most of one wall. An elderly man sat beside it with the relaxed smile of a grandfather. He introduced himself as William Marshall and invited Luren to sit. That peaceful meeting officially began Luren's new life as a frontier lord. Pioneer knights were the empire's officially sanctioned frontier conquerors. For centuries, these volunteers had opened jungles, deserts, mountains, and wastelands. They fought monsters and tribes while slowly expanding imperial civilization. Even Lotham had once been nothing more than a pioneer military settlement. Most frontier claimants began with the limited title of ordinary knight. Luren entered the process holding an appointment directly granting him baronial rank. The difference between knight and baron shaped wealth, authority, and political survival. Many knights spent entire lives chasing a title Luren received immediately. William's personal attention came from more than a document. The surname Hornck carried enormous weight throughout the southern territories. The family had supported the winning emperor during an earlier succession struggle. Rewards of land and privilege transformed them from viscounts into powerful marquises. Their private knight order terrified southern tribes long before battles actually began. Luren, however, stood outside the family's celebrated public image. He was the hidden bastard son of Pedro Hornck, the family's original heir. His mother was rumored to have been a witch. Considering Luren's later abilities, the rumor felt impossible to dismiss. Pedro genuinely loved both mother and child, despite the political inconvenience. He paid for Luren's tutors, education, swordsmanship, and comfortable upbringing. Then Pedro made the catastrophic mistake of pursuing adventure instead of inheritance. When Luren was 14, both parents departed to explore ancient ruins. They promised to return, but neither was ever seen again. Their disappearance erased Luren's protection inside the Hornck estate. Relatives who had tolerated him suddenly viewed the bastard as a dangerous possibility. Pedro's legitimate wife belonged to another influential noble family. Her adult son had excellent reasons to prefer Luren permanently removed. Pedro's brothers also benefited if the missing heir's bastard vanished. Luren therefore possessed an impressive collection of relatives who wanted him dead. At 16, he mysteriously fell into deep water. The incident resembled the convenient accidents common in noble political dramas. Fortunately, family patriarch Conrad happened to pass nearby. Servants pulled Luren from the water before the assassination attempt could succeed. Conrad sent him away, offering neither explanation nor meaningful protection. Luren remained bedridden for 3 days beneath a violent fever. But then during that fever, the original soul inside the body disappeared. A consciousness from Earth awakened in its place. The newcomer inherited Luren's memories, dangers, identity, and unfinished grudges. He also brought something impossible into this medieval world. A game-like system appeared within his vision. Training granted experience, combat granted experience, and experience created measurable growth. Unlike a game, every enemy here could strike back and kill him. After reviewing the family's murderous politics, Luren reached a simple conclusion. Remaining inside the Hornck estate would eventually place him inside a coffin. So he did what any unwanted bastard with a grudge would do. Joined the Imperial Army. He served 5 years within the Southern Legion's Falcon Corps. His assignment was Drambo Outpost, the most exposed position along the border. Soldiers sent there were either trusted, disposable, or extremely unlucky. Luren survived because the system rewarded every physical effort. Sword drills produced experience, marching produced experience, and exercise produced experience. Other soldiers reached natural limits while Luren continued advancing beyond them. He treated the dangerous outpost like an endless grinding location. By 21, he had risen to Centurion through battle and relentless training. Then he returned to the Hornck estate and requested a private audience. Nobody learned exactly what Luren and Conrad discussed behind closed doors. The following day, Luren surrendered every possible claim to the inheritance. His bastard rights were already uncertain, but symbolism still mattered. In exchange, Conrad secured a pioneer appointment, granting Luren the title of Baron. Southern nobles believed Conrad was compensating for Pedro's disappearance. More suspicious observers suspected an attempt to spread Hornck influence northward. Luren cared about neither interpretation because the appointment guaranteed freedom. The wasteland offered danger, but danger was preferable to poisonous relatives. William Marshall was no ordinary administrator receiving frontier applicants. He held the honorary title of Count and once served as vice commander. He also belonged to Emperor Philip VI's trusted inner circle. Luren had previously seen him delivering a victory speech before the Southern Legion. System-enhanced eyesight had allowed Luren to remember the distant face clearly. William confirmed that Luren had served at Drambo Outpost. He recognized that surviving there required exceptional ability. William praised the achievement as worthy of the Hornck name. Luren smiled without confirming whether family blood deserved any credit. The old soldier soon abandoned formal pleasantries and spoke directly. Years earlier, William had owed Conrad Hornck a significant personal favor. Conrad had now requested that William protect and assist Luren. William studied the young baron carefully, searching for hesitation or weakness. Luren met the examination without blinking. William finally asked what resources he needed. Luren immediately performed the saddest version of his childhood history imaginable. He described himself as an abandoned bastard forced into military service by hunger. William's eye began twitching before the performance reached its dramatic conclusion. Realizing patience was disappearing, Luren quickly presented his requested support package. He asked for 5,000 gold coins, 1,000 slaves, and hundreds of weapons. Armor, knightly lances, and steel swords completed the absurdly expensive demand. William stared as though Luren had requested ownership of the moon. Luren began reducing quantities while pretending each concession caused terrible pain. William ordered him to stop behaving like a barracks merchant. A baron, he insisted, should display at least minimal noble dignity. Luren privately noted that dignity neither fed soldiers nor purchased steel. Nevertheless, he nodded with the obedient expression of a respectful young noble. That was when William revealed that he knew all about Luren's military trading business. The famous merchant of Drambo Outpost had apparently never been particularly secret. Luren could only smile awkwardly after being exposed. William refused the outrageous gifts, but arranged substantial commercial assistance. The United Trading Company would sell provisions and weapons at discounted rates. That offer alone could save Luren a fortune during the expedition. Then William revealed something far more valuable than money. Pioneer knights normally received territories assigned by the Herald's Hall. Luren would instead choose his own location and claim additional surrounding land. He had arrived carrying bribe money, yet William offered the privilege freely. The old count first recommended a safe region close to Lotham. It possessed reliable water, minerals, neighbors, and convenient supply routes. The previous claimant, another nobleman's son, had died several years earlier. Natives or ORCs had killed him before development could begin. William mentioned the death with almost suspiciously little sympathy. Political hostility clearly existed between William and the dead claimant's family. Luren ignored that feud and examined the distant portions of the map. Safety near Lotham would also bring inspectors, neighbors, obligations, and interference. He had escaped southern family politics to avoid exactly those problems. The unexplored interior offered greater danger, but far greater independence. Question marks and skull symbols covered large sections of that wilderness. Luren pointed directly toward an isolated region called Pressbog. William examined the selection as though checking for signs of brain damage. He warned that Pressbog was deep, uncertain, and extremely difficult to support. Luren confirmed the decision without hesitation. William eventually shrugged and granted the larger territory exactly as promised. But then the real favor came through imperial registration. New pioneer nobles normally endured a 1-year probationary period. Inspectors later examined their settlements, defenses, populations, and territorial control. Successful claimants received official noble recognition and began paying imperial taxes. Those who failed lost time, money, and occasionally their lives. William removed the entire probationary requirement from Luren's case. The Herald's Hall immediately recognized him as a full imperial baron. No inspection, delay, or bureaucratic nightmare stood between him and authority. William had pushed Luren past an entire year of imperial bureaucracy. William's influence continued helping once Luren reached the United Trading Company. The manager bowed repeatedly and applied a 30% discount to every purchase. Supplies worth over 1,000 gold were rounded down to exactly 1,000. Luren produced payment from the spatial storage ring on his finger. The money bag appeared directly from empty air. The manager briefly lost professional composure after recognizing spatial equipment. Such artifacts were rare enough to imply frightening wealth or powerful support. The merchant immediately assumed Luren with some hidden air of extraordinary importance. Luren allowed the misunderstanding because useful rumors cost nothing. The company agreed to store all purchased goods without charging additional fees. Luren left the shop feeling unusually successful. He wandered through the city and watched a violent northern street fight. The participants displayed more enthusiasm than technique, but the entertainment was free. That evening, Luren gathered his companions and spread William's map across the table. Cass reported first on the dangers of the Jewel Wasteland. Jackal tribes, goblins, half-ORCs, bandits, and dishonest merchants filled the region. Several famous outlaw groups carried names such as One Eye and Bloody. Large caravans could become robbers whenever they believed retaliation was unlikely. The current group could cross the wasteland, but controlling Pressbog required numbers. Ed then reported the prices demanded by northern slave merchants. Adult men cost roughly 1 gold coin each. Adult women generally sold for approximately 50 silver coins. Skilled laborers were far more expensive than ordinary workers. A carpenter or mason might cost 15 gold coins. A capable blacksmith could demand twice that amount. Veteran soldiers ranged from 5 to 10 gold, depending on experience. Elite fighters cost around 30 gold, assuming any were available. No dealer openly offered warriors capable of using battle aura. ORC and half ORC slaves were remarkably cheap at 50 silver. Their enormous appetites, rebellious nature, and murderous reputation explained the discount. Luren calculated expenses until another important resource entered his thoughts. Reinforcements from the Viking Isles were expected to arrive soon. The next morning, violent knocking awakened him before sunrise. Marco stood outside beside something resembling a bear disguised as a man. Ragnar had finally reached Lotham. The enormous Viking smiled as though the dangerous journey had been effortless. He explained that few bandits willingly challenged a traveling company of Vikings. 35 additional warriors had accompanied him from the eastern islands. Vikings survived by raiding merchant vessels rather than farming or conducting ordinary trade. Razor reefs and violent currents protected their islands from imperial conquest. The empire occasionally hired small Viking companies as temporary mercenaries. That arrangement had originally placed Ragnar under Luren's command. Luren followed Ragnar into the inn courtyard to inspect the newcomers. 35 giants occupied every bench, wall, barrel, and patch of open ground. Their laughter shook windows and frightened ordinary guests. Sun and salt had darkened their skin to reddish brown. Thick beards were braided with copper rings, bones, and crude ornaments. Their equipment, unfortunately, looked far less impressive than their bodies. Some wore leather armor that had survived far too many battles. Others protected themselves with cloth and untreated animal hides. Their chipped axes resembled tools used to break rocks rather than enemies. Worn clubs had lost most of their spikes. These terrifying warriors possessed strength, confidence, and almost no money. Most stood around 2 meters tall. Ragnar reached nearly 2.5 meters. Beside them, Luren looked like a stubborn child commanding walking fortresses. He entered the group and formally introduced himself. When registering, he had inserted the surname Lee into his noble name. Noble families understood that adopting another surname symbolized deliberate separation. Lee had belonged to Luren during his previous life on Earth. Nobody in this world understood its meaning, but Luren remembered. He announced that Ragnar's commander was now commander of the entire Viking company. Loyal service would provide meat, alcohol, money, equipment, and future opportunities. In return, every warrior needed to remember 3 rules. The first rule was obedience. The second rule was also obedience. The third rule repeated the same essential lesson. If Luren ordered east, nobody would wander west chasing something interesting. The Vikings stared silently at the much smaller human before them. Their expressions suggested a noisy child had entered a wolf den. Ragnar attempted to intervene, but Marco stopped him. Luren's original soldiers recognized the dangerous smile appearing on their commander's face. That expression had preceded countless punishments throughout the Falcon Corps. Supply. Officers once awakened naked and tied to a flagpole because of it. Luren invoked the most respected Viking tradition. The strongest fighter commanded, while weaker warriors obeyed. He offered 100 gold coins to anyone capable of defeating him. Anyone who lost would serve without complaint. A tall warrior named Kobe immediately stepped forward. Ragnar warned that accepting the challenge would become a permanent regret. Kobe admitted he could not defeat Ragnar. However, he confidently believed the smaller Luren would be easy. He called Luren a little potato. The old soldiers collectively realized Kobe had made a catastrophic verbal mistake. Everyone moved toward Lotham's public arena. Morning emptiness left only a sleepy attendant guarding the entrance. The sight of dozens of giants immediately sent him running for management. The arena manager was short, round, cheerful, and commercially alert. His tiny eyes brightened when he saw 36 marketable Viking warriors. He privately offered to purchase them for arena combat. Vikings were valuable because noble spectators loved powerful and untamed fighters. The manager's gaze lingered on exposed muscles with unsettling professional enthusiasm. Luren rejected the sale and requested temporary use of the empty arena. The manager refused payment, hoping friendship would produce greater future value. Luren attempted to pay, while the manager repeatedly insisted the arena was free. The Vikings watched the polite argument and became even less impressed. Kobe considered fighting gently to avoid embarrassing Ragnar's small employer. The manager remained to observe, expecting some hidden weapon or trick. Kobe and Luren walked into the center of the sand. Both agreed to fight with bare hands. Kobe discarded his axe and proudly announced his name. Years later, he would remember that moment as a terrible life decision. The battle became an absolute massacre almost immediately. Kobe lunged forward, planning to seize Luren with overwhelming size. Luren sidestepped as though the charging Viking moved through deep water. One punch struck Kobe directly in the stomach. The giant collapsed onto his knees as though someone had removed his bones. He gasped desperately while reconsidering every choice that brought him there. Luren crouched until their faces were level. Even kneeling, Kobe remained so tall that Luren still had to bend. A silent insult accompanied Luren's most infuriating smile. The system listed taunt at level 25 among his developed abilities. That skill existed because Luren had spent years perfecting psychological warfare. And suddenly, Kobe's eyes reddened as rage flooded his entire body. Muscles expanded, veins rose, and dark crimson spread across his skin. A thunderous roar rolled through the empty arena. Marco quietly asked whether Kobe had entered a berserker state. Ragnar explained that Luren had simply made the Viking catastrophically angry. Ed approached the arena manager and recommended finding a priest. The original squad knew exactly how far Luren might carry the lesson. Kobe attacked again with strength magnified by blind fury. Luren caught both wrists and held them without taking a single step. The giant thrashed like a furious child restrained by an exhausted parent. Then Luren released one wrist and secured the other with both hands. He lowered his center of gravity and swung. Kobe's enormous body lifted from the ground. The Viking flew through the air like a sack filled with angry stones. He struck the sand hard enough to shake the arena. Luren immediately swung him toward the opposite side. Another impact threw dust across the watching warriors. Left, and right again. The ground shook with each landing. Kobe became a human hammer, repeatedly striking the packed ground. Luren continued for roughly 15 brutal rotations. Petty discipline required sufficient repetition to become unforgettable. When released, Kobe collapsed like a discarded training dummy. His berserker swelling faded, while a faint groan confirmed survival. The manager screamed for a priest, with equal parts panic and excitement. Watching a small Baron ragdoll a Viking was the best entertainment the manager had seen in years. A priest healed Kobe and discovered mostly superficial injuries. Luren had controlled his force, while rage had hardened Kobe's body. The giant returned to his feet remarkably quickly. Vikings appeared capable of surviving punishment that would flatten ordinary soldiers. The incident reminded Luren's veterans of his first battle against Ragnar. Back then, Luren had praised Ragnar as an exceptionally durable punching bag. After Kobe recovered, every new Viking became extraordinarily attentive. Luren asked whether anyone else wished to challenge his command. 35 heads shook so rapidly that braids nearly became weapons. Leadership had been established through the language Vikings respected most. Before leaving, Luren privately approached the arena manager. He requested notification whenever Vikings entered the arena's slave inventory. Men, women, and children would all be purchased and resold to Luren. The manager understood the plan immediately. Luren intended to build a territory supported by Viking strength. Many nobles had attempted similar projects and failed disastrously. A single berserker could be controlled under favorable circumstances. A company of berserkers could become a moving extinction event. Few lords wanted soldiers who might destroy allies, settlements, and employers together. The empire therefore hired Vikings only in limited temporary groups. The manager agreed, although his expression revealed considerable doubt. Luren welcomed that doubt because proving people wrong remained deeply satisfying. He next marched the Viking company toward Lotham's southeastern commercial district. Weapons, grain, armor, tools, and luxury goods filled the crowded streets. Standard equipment from the United Trading Company would not suit these giants. Ed had located a respected dwarven weapon shop called Copper Furnace Flame. Inside, actual dwarves hammered steel while casually drinking beside the forge. The combination suggested either ancient craftsmanship or dangerous workplace habits. A small green employee approached the group with perfect manners. One Viking loudly identified him as a goblin. Ragnar corrected the mistake and explained that the gentleman was a gnome. Luren had previously taught his men how to distinguish the two species. Gnomes possessed clearer eyes, wider foreheads, and considerably better employment prospects. Goblins possessed cloudy yellow eyes and violent criminal tendencies. Gnomes despised suggestions that they were closely related to goblins. Scholars made that comparison frequently, usually from a safe distance. This gnome wore a tailored suit and gold-rimmed glasses. His polished appearance represented a determined rejection of every goblin stereotype. Luren kicked the offending Viking and offered an immediate apology. He described his men as cavemen who happened to own axes. The gnome accepted graciously and praised copper furnace flames cultured customers. Luren looked at the barbarians touching merchandise throughout the shop. Drowning the entire company briefly seemed like a reasonable administrative solution. He requested equipment durable enough to survive Viking combat. The gnome studied their size and movement before recommending appropriate weapons. Double-bladed battle axes matched their power and simple fighting style. Refined steel would provide the durability ordinary iron could not. Chainmail offered protection without restricting their mobility. Luren ordered 1 battle axe and 3 throwing axes for each warrior. The imagined sight of 36 synchronized axes justified much of the expense. The gnome produced an abacus and began calculating with cheerful precision. Each refined battle axe cost 25 gold coins. 3 throwing axes added another 15 gold. Custom chainmail for Viking proportions cost 120 gold. Complete equipment for 1 warrior therefore required 160 gold. Outfitting all 36 would cost 5,760 gold. The gnome announced the total with the warmest smile imaginable. Luren's face froze while his financial soul quietly left his body. He technically possessed enough money to pay the full amount. Spending everything on armor, however, would destroy the entire settlement plan. Even inexperienced adventurers knew never to empty their inventory in one shop. Luren changed the order to 10 chainmail sets. The remaining 26 Vikings would receive leather armor instead. The gnome displayed no judgment and immediately recalculated. Weapons for everyone required 1,440 gold. 10 chainmail sets required another 1,200. 26 leather sets completed the order. The revised total became 2,666 gold coins. Every click of the abacus sounded like another stab into Luren's wallet. Only 10 axes and 2 chainmail sets were currently available. The shop promised to complete everything else within 2 days. Luren attempted to negotiate a discount and received a polite refusal. Dwarven craftsmanship did not participate in sales, promotions, or noble pressure. Luren respected the policy despite personally suffering from it. Marco escorted the available equipment back toward the inn. Luren continued shopping for ordinary clothing with his Viking procession. 2 outfits, boots, and necessities for everyone cost only 5 gold. Comparing clothing prices to military equipment felt almost insulting. Feeding the Vikings created another financial disaster. They attacked food with the efficiency of a natural catastrophe. After eating, every Viking received an unavoidable order to bathe. The command produced more resistance than the earlier battle challenge. Fresh water was scarce throughout the Viking Isles. Most islanders washed in seawater, which barely counted as washing. Their collective smell had become a biological weapon. The warriors approached the bathhouse as though facing public execution. Then they remembered Kobe's flight across the arena. Suddenly, every Viking discovered powerful enthusiasm for personal hygiene. Fear accomplished what soap advertisements never could. Clean, dressed, and temporarily pleasant, the company entered the slave market. Luren walked at the front while 36 giants followed behind. Pedestrians scattered before them without requiring any verbal encouragement. The procession resembled a criminal boss arriving with an oversized private army. Luren secretly enjoyed fulfilling a fantasy remembered from Earth. Ed's earlier investigation allowed immediate negotiation with the chosen trader. Luren requested 200 adult men and 50 adult women. He also required carpenters, blacksmiths, masons, and tailors. The trader calculated a total of 525 gold. He generously reduced the price by 5 gold for the enormous purchase. After the weapon expense, Luren fought aggressively for every coin. He offered 500, and watched the merchant begin protesting with the outrage of a man personally insulted by math. Luren accepted 520 under one additional condition. He wanted slaves who still had families. Elderly parents and young children would accompany the working adults. Luren offered 5 copper for older dependents. Very young children would also be purchased for minimal amounts. The trader's face brightened with uncontrolled delight. Dependents consumed resources without producing immediate labor. Many traders abandoned or killed them after selling useful relatives. Luren was volunteering to purchase inventory normally considered worthless. From the merchant's perspective, he had become the perfect customer. Ed returned from inspection and quietly mentioned hidden beast folk captives. The trader immediately began praising ORCs as estate guards and arena fighters. He noticed the Vikings and wisely abandoned that particular sales argument. Ed suspected the captives belonged to the powerful Rin Lion tribe. Selling members of ORC royalty could provoke dangerous retaliation. The trader panicked and insisted they were ordinary mastiff folk. He led Luren into the rear yard to prove the distinction. True Rin lions stood nearly 3 meters tall with golden hair. These prisoners were smaller, brown-haired, and visibly canine. They belonged to a mastiff subspecies oppressed throughout beast folk society. Their resemblance to royal Rin lions had inspired centuries of resentment. The powerful considered them presumptuous, while common tribes considered them privileged. They received punishment from every side without receiving actual status. The history reminded Luren of human injustices from Earth. The trader claimed he had purchased them from a bear tribe noble. Garash Plateau could no longer feed its growing population. ORC nobles increasingly sold their own commoners to human merchants. Human nobles behaved no better, leaving little room for moral superiority. Luren asked for a price covering all 20 mastiff prisoners. Negotiations became intense, and even his baronial certificate achieved nothing. A frontier baron apparently lacked influence within the slave trade. They finally agreed on 5 gold for each mastiff. 100 gold purchased the entire group. That evening, Luren's people occupied most of the inn's first floor. Vikings consumed roasted meat as though completing a military assignment. Ale barrels emptied, despite Luren limiting each warrior to 2 mugs. The innkeeper abandoned his counter to help overwhelmed servants. Luren watched every plate remove another imaginary coin from his future. Bankruptcy had never looked so noisy or tasted so good. The front door eventually opened, interrupting the dining hall chaos. A scarred soldier in light armor entered first. His hand remained near his sword, while his eyes inspected every corner. A handsome golden-haired noble followed him. The young man wore fitted hunting clothes and carried a rapier. His relaxed confidence belonged to someone unfamiliar with poverty or public beatings. Several dangerous retainers entered behind him. They included knights, a priest, an archer, and specialized bodyguards. The Vikings became silent and watched the strangers like territorial wolves. The young noble requested Baron Luren Hornck by name. He introduced himself as Luren Hornck and claimed he had come respectfully. Luren remained seated and raised his mug in casual greeting. Luren's guards disliked the informality, but their master stopped any reaction. Luren accepted a seat and apologized for visiting without invitation. Luren offered him ale and explained that all peaceful guests were welcome. Luren observed that Luren's manners appeared more northern than southern. The comment described informality and roughness dressed up as a compliment. Luren answered that wasteland tribes respected steel and fire, not etiquette. Then he identified Luren as Lord of Frost Hawk Domain. Luren had memorized the name from William's detailed territorial map. Frosthawk stood northwest of Lotham along the wasteland's outer boundary. Its owner was already a certified and successful pioneer knight. Luren agreed that hostile natives usually needed to be killed before settlement. He then politely asked where Luren's territory was located. Luren answered with a single name, Pressbog. But then Luren's eyebrow twitched before his flawless diplomatic smile returned. He praised Luren's courage with sarcasm hidden beneath perfect manners. Both young nobles instantly recognized that the other would be troublesome. The Hawk family had earned military nobility through battlefield success. Their first earl received northern lands after distinguished imperial service. However, established northern houses continued treating the Hawks as outsiders. Luren represented the family's admired 4th generation. He was his grandfather's favorite descendant and an unusually capable frontier commander. Instead of choosing a safe military career, Luren became a pioneer knight. He successfully developed Frost Hawk Domain into a functioning settlement. His impressed grandfather now provided substantial money and political support. Lon had visited Lotham to sell minerals and report home. Gossip about a southern baron defeating a Viking drew him toward the inn. Befriending Luren could create useful connections with the Hornck family. Even without that benefit, two frontier lords had more reasons to cooperate than to fight. Yet after seeing Luren command 36 Vikings, Lon felt tempted to test him. Northern and southern nobles carried an old tradition of mutual provocation. Luren understood the challenge before Lon openly expressed it. The two men sat in silence, neither willing to surrender psychological ground. Lon eventually mentioned Luren's victory inside the arena. His followers, he said, desired a friendly combat demonstration. The invitation translated clearly into a demand for a fight. Luren understood that future negotiations required visible strength. There was no reason for the Baron himself to step into the street. Luren had soldiers precisely so he would not waste time fighting another noble's retainers. Luren suggested allowing the Vikings to represent him instead. Warriors without titles could fight freely without concerns about noble respect. Ragnar received the assignment. Luren described the contest as a friendly cultural exchange. Lon selected an armored knight named Gal. Both nobles then secretly signaled their representatives to attack without mercy. Friendship remained the official priority only in public language. Since the arena was closed, everyone moved into the street. In noble society, organizing an armed duel after dinner somehow counted as civilized behavior. Ragnar selected one newly purchased double-bladed axe. Gal drew a broadsword from his horse. Luren tossed a copper coin upward to begin the match. The coin touched stone, and both warriors launched forward. Ragnar's axe descended with the force of a collapsing wall. His reach forced Gal to abandon an intended horizontal attack. Gal raised the broadsword and blocked upward. The impact produced a metallic explosion that hurt every nearby ear. Gal slid backward while his boots carved trenches through packed dirt. Lon and his retainers stared in disbelief. They had not expected a Viking to combine such speed and strength. Ragnar laughed while rotating the axe through bright arcs of reflected firelight. Gal's hands quickly began losing sensation. Still, the knight possessed real training and refused to collapse. A golden battle aura suddenly ignited around his blade. Gal thrust toward Ragnar's throat during the smallest available opening. Ragnar pulled the axe back and blocked the glowing sword. Sparks scattered across the street. Then Ragnar returned to the simplest strategy imaginable. He swung rapidly and refused to stop. One crushing blow followed another without rhythm or mercy. Gal possessed superior technique, but never received time to use it. Every attempted change met another axe descending toward his head. Blocking became the only action separating him from death. The street rang with repeated collisions of steel. Ragnar finally stepped backward and lowered his weapon. Gal's battle aura had shattered completely. His hands trembled so violently that the sword scraped against stone. Blood from split palms traveled down the blade. Lon immediately conceded the match. His priest healed the wounds, but could not stop the shaking. Magic repaired flesh, while the body still remembered overwhelming punishment. Lon sincerely praised Ragnar's strength. Ordinary Vikings were dangerous, but rarely capable of defeating trained knights. Ragnar had destroyed one using little more than repeated basic attacks. Skill mattered less when every half-second delivered another moving fortress. Lon suggested that such warriors explain Luren's confidence regarding Pressbog. He carefully implied that perhaps Ragnar was Luren's only exceptional soldier. Luren understood the insult and smiled without responding. Ragnar had not used even his first true transformation. His second berserker form remained completely hidden. Revealing everything to a potential rival would have been foolish. Lon delivered a polished farewell filled with promises of lasting friendship. Frosthawk Domain, he claimed, would gladly assist Luren during future difficulties. Every word sounded generous while committing Lon to almost nothing. Luren mentally rejected the speech as ordinary noble performance. He had not traveled north to join an unfamiliar political faction. He lacked information about alliances, grudges, and secret family conflicts. Choosing sides before understanding the board invited exploitation. Luren's plan remained simple: reach Pressbog, build walls, grow powerful, and discourage unwanted visitors. Being left alone represented his ideal form of noble success. The following morning, he ordered the Vikings to remain inside the inn. Anyone causing trouble would not personally receive punishment. Instead, Luren promised to beat Ragnar responsible for every violation. Ragnar's smile disappeared immediately. He guaranteed that every Viking would behave like a proper lady. One murderous glance from their captain made 35 warriors shiver. Fear-based delegation had produced another effective management system. Luren and Marco returned to the markets for final purchases. They collected provisions from the United Trading Company. Then Luren visited Copper Furnace Flame to inspect the unfinished order. Returning to the gnome's shop proved financially dangerous. The salesman began displaying accessories Luren had never previously considered. Every item appeared useful, affordable, and specifically designed for frontier survival. Within minutes, Luren was purchasing equipment he had not known existed. He finally escaped into the street, clutching a noticeably lighter money bag. The smiling gnome had nearly emptied him without using threats or weapons. Luren called the merchant cursed while privately respecting his terrifying ability. Perhaps because of the enormous purchase, the shop completed delivery that evening. Vikings reacted to new axes like children receiving festival gifts. These particular children stood 2 meters tall and could decapitate horses. Ragnar distributed the 10 chainmail sets among his strongest fighters. Marco, Ed, Cass, and Tom already possessed superior personal equipment. The company's discarded Viking gear was kept rather than thrown away. 20 Mastiff folk still required weapons and protection of some kind. Financial desperation had transformed Luren into an enthusiastic recycler. The final major purchase came from the United Trading Company. 2 rock-armored camels had suddenly become available at a remarkable discount. Luren suspected William had arranged the offer through indirect pressure. Perhaps the Count had heard about the arena victory and Lon's visit. Rock-armored camels were among the finest transport animals in the Empire. Each measured between 8 and 10 meters long. Their shoulders rose more than 4 meters above the ground. Natural stone-like plates covered them from head to tail. Threat caused a special secretion that hardened those plates even further. Despite appearing like moving fortresses, the creatures behaved gently. They survived on grass so poor that ordinary livestock rejected it. Internal water storage allowed them to travel for weeks through dry regions. Shock-absorbing feet crossed stone, mud, sand, and broken terrain. Their backs could carry several tons without significant difficulty. Armies and merchant guilds competed fiercely to obtain them. Hunting had nearly eliminated wild populations. Most surviving camels were now raised on heavily guarded farms. Even discounted, purchasing 2 consumed nearly all remaining gold. Luren became officially and comprehensively broke. His money bag had reached the stage where echoes replaced coins. The resulting mood remained volcanic for 2 full days. Still, the animals proved worth the financial pain. Supplies filled only part of their enormous carrying platforms. Children, elderly slaves, women, and skilled workers could ride above the cargo. Healthy adults walked beside wagons and ordinary horses. The Mastiff folk remained restrained and guarded by 2 Vikings. Luren offered opportunity, but trust would still require proof. The caravan left Lotham at dawn and traveled north. Villages and farms still lined the road during the first day. Farmers paused their work to stare at the enormous procession. City cavalry patrols passed occasionally and inspected the unusual company. Civilization remained recognizable despite the increasing emptiness. During the second day, grass began swallowing the road. Abandoned windmills and broken cottages appeared beside forgotten fields. Empty livestock pens suggested families had departed without returning. On the third day, even ruined settlements disappeared. Corpses of wasteland natives replaced all signs of human habitation. Vultures circled overhead, patiently following the caravan's route. The landscape announced that law had ended. On the fourth day, a human fortress appeared unexpectedly. The stone castle stood alone against wind and endless grass. It lacked the beauty and elegance of southern noble estates. Crumbling battlements were repaired with wood, mud, and determination. Several towers leaned at angles that inspired little confidence. An ice wolf banner identified the fortress as property of House Snow. Luren had bribed a Herald's Hall clerk for information about them. The Snows had once been celebrated northern military nobles. Their founder earned an earldom through battlefield heroism under Philip I. Unfortunately, their generations proved terrible at political survival. They joined losing factions and stepped onto every available political trap. Rival houses gradually divided their land and weakened their title. The family fell from earls to viscounts. Their remaining domain had become this exhausted frontier fortress. Viscount Snow was absent when Luren's caravan arrived. The steward invited the new baron to enter and rest. Luren declined because a supply train would remain exposed outside. Entering an unknown lord's fortress without necessity created avoidable risk. The caravan camped near the walls instead. Everyone rested under guard and departed again at first light. The fifth day brought constant signs of hostile attention. Goblins, jackal people, and half-orcs appeared within the tall grass. They watched the caravan like hungry animals surrounding wounded prey. A few scouts crept dangerously close. Cass calmly shot 2 goblins and 1 jackal without stopping his horse. The remaining watchers vanished into grass as though swallowed by the earth. They did not truly leave. Luren could still hear movement following from several directions. Scattered tribes were gathering numbers and courage. Everyone received orders to wear full combat equipment. Male slaves were handed clubs, tools, and anything with a sharp point. Marco asked whether the company should attack immediately. Luren studied the grass, then looked toward the captives. The enemy force had not yet become large enough. If Luren staged a demonstration, he wanted a proper audience. Slaves and mastiff folk needed to understand their new master's strength. Fear could build obedience faster than hopeful speeches. Luren understood that method was ugly but reliable. Tom and Ed received orders to scout without traveling too far. Unknown tribes might possess abilities unfamiliar even to experienced southern soldiers. The 2 scouts disappeared into the grass with practiced silence. Throughout the afternoon, they returned with increasingly detailed reports. As sunset approached, Luren decided the audience had finally become large enough. Wagons formed a defensive circle around the 2 armored camels. The arrangement created a crude but effective mobile fortress. Slaves moved inside the ring. Adult men stood along the outer interior edge. Women remained behind them, while children and elderly gathered centrally. Marco, Ed, Cass, and Tom guarded both captives and non-combatants. The 20 mastiff folk received positions near the front. Luren wanted them close enough to understand every consequence. Then he gathered the 35 newly recruited Vikings. From spatial storage, Luren produced an ancient-looking leather book. A sword and wheat crest decorated its dark brown cover. Oxidized copper plates lined the spine beneath mysterious artificial runes. A cracked red strap and incense scent completed the illusion. The object looked valuable enough to inspire tomb robbers. Luren explained that he had discovered the book inside ancient ruins. Warriors pledging loyalty through it would supposedly break their natural limits. Ragnar, he declared, was living evidence of its power. The Vikings exchanged uncertain glances. Prophets and frauds had visited their islands before. None had ever returned home capable of defeating a tribal chief. Ragnar had done exactly that after serving under Luren. He also revealed a second berserker transformation, unknown within his small tribe. The islanders had celebrated until Ragnar mentioned serving a human lord. Vikings and Ponti's humans shared generations of distrust. Tribal elders therefore sent only 35 warriors as a test. If Ragnar's claim proved true, many others would eventually follow. The recruits had now witnessed Luren's strength, generosity, and terrifying discipline. They wanted to believe the promise represented more than another human trick. Luren opened the book and ordered them to write their names. Kobe awkwardly revealed that none of them could write. Luren had forgotten that his giant recruits were completely illiterate. The dramatic presentation collapsed beneath one painfully practical problem. Frustration earned Kobe another immediate kick. Luren ordered everyone to use thumbprints instead. One by one, Vikings dipped massive thumbs into ink. Each warrior shouted his name before striking the page. Quiet participation violated every principle of Viking culture. What none of the Vikings knew was each thumbprint allowed Luren to approve a hidden system invitation. The legendary oathbook was actually a disguised party registration method. A craftsman in the south had built and artificially aged the prop. Every rune, smell, stain, and copperplate was completely fraudulent. Luren considered it one of his finest achievements. The party feature had unlocked when he became a military squad leader. Anyone willingly accepting his command could join. Members gained experience, levels, and advancement through the hidden system. They could not see their own interfaces. Only Luren could inspect their statistics, classes, and loyalty. Ragnar's second berserker form came entirely from system progression. Ancient magic and divine blessing had nothing to do with it. Once registered, every Viking's advancement route became visible. Their path began with Hunter and continued through Warrior and Raider. Higher stages included Berserker, Spirit Berserker, and Thunder Soul Berserker. The final known stage was Dragon Head Berserker. Most newcomers ranked as Viking warriors or raiders. Ragnar already stood at the Spirit Berserker stage. His authority among the company promoted him onto the system's hero roster. Luren's favorite barbarian had officially become a named hero. While recruitment continued, the hostile coalition finally approached. Tom and Ed estimated roughly 100 jackal people. Around 200 goblins followed them. 30 well-equipped half-ORCs from the dangerous rear element. 3 hostile groups had temporarily united because the caravan promised enormous loot. The half-ORCs carried proper iron weapons and organized armor. Their commander wore full plate, an extraordinary luxury in the wasteland. Jackal warriors used mismatched equipment stolen from previous victims. Most goblins carried wooden sticks and very little courage. Their leaders had already begun arguing about strategy. The half-ORC commander wanted to wait for darkness. A night ambush offered greater surprise and reduced defensive visibility. The Jackal Chief and Goblin Sorcerer demanded an immediate attack. They feared larger tribes would arrive and steal the caravan. Greed overcame patience by a 2-to-1 vote. The half-ORC commander understood the risk better than his partners. 40 guards protecting hundreds of travelers made little strategic sense. The caravan was either exceptionally strong or unbelievably foolish. Too many frontier idiots had died for him to dismiss the second possibility. Still, 30 half-ORCs could not attack alone. He reluctantly positioned his soldiers behind the charging tribes. Approximately 330 enemies faced 41 trained fighters. Hundreds of slaves and mastiff folk watched from the wagon circle. The demonstration Luren wanted had finally acquired a worthy scale. Jackal warriors charged first, filling the dusk with howls. 200 goblins followed behind their sorcerer. The half-ORCs advanced in disciplined formation at the rear. Luren reached into storage and drew his enormous two-handed greatsword. The weapon exceeded even the broadswords used by Imperial heavy infantry. He lifted it one-handed and casually rotated the massive blade. Charging goblins and jackals were only obstacles. Luren's attention remained fixed on the half-ORCs. Those disciplined soldiers represented the only meaningful targets. He ordered the Vikings to kill everything, attacking the caravan. Then Luren sprinted forward faster than any follower could match. Ragnar and the Viking company roared behind him. The first enemy in Luren's path happened to be the Jackal Chief. The enormous warrior swung a dangerous meteor hammer. Luren barely noticed the weapon or the chief's status. One horizontal greatsword strike caught him across the body. The 7-foot jackal flew backward like cargo struck by a charging wagon. Several of his own warriors fell beneath him. He hit the ground and never rose. The Jackal Chief was done. Luren continued forward without looking back. His greatsword carried no sharpened edge. It was a gigantic slab of refined steel built for impact. Instead of cutting enemies, it demolished them. Every collision produced a deep sound like a wrecking ball. Jackal ribcages collapsed beneath single swings. Goblins, struck by the blade, disappeared beneath clouds of dirt and blood. Luren carved a direct path toward the half-ORC formation. Vikings slammed into the remaining jackals and goblins behind him. Their new axes transformed the charge into organized butchery. The Oath recruits immediately began receiving system experience. Invisible growth flowed through every warrior connected to Luren's party. The half-ORC commander watched the approaching Baron with increasing alarm. Luren had crossed hundreds of enemies without slowing. Plate armor and formation discipline suddenly seemed far less reassuring. The commander ordered spears forward and shields locked. Luren struck the defensive wall with his greatsword. Shields folded, arms broke, and bodies crashed into soldiers behind them. The formation opened like a door kicked from its hinges. Luren stepped through and began destroying the interior ranks. Half-ORCs attacked from every direction. Their weapons struck his body without penetrating his system-enhanced defense. Each blow still caused irritating pain. Luren considered that inconvenience for more offensive than the actual danger. A spear thrust toward his thigh. He trapped the shaft beneath one foot and shattered it. The returning greatsword launched its owner across the battlefield. A curved blade struck Luren's shoulder and tore only clothing. He answered by crushing the attacker's chestplate inward. The half-ORC commander attempted to reorganize his collapsing soldiers. Luren reached him before another order could leave his mouth. One kick landed directly against the armored chest. Metal caved inward while the commander flew across the field. 50 experience appeared at the edge of Luren's vision. The system notification confirmed that the officer would never rise again. Luren appreciated being able to move notifications away from his central sight. Poor interface design could have become deadlier than enemy weapons. With the strongest half ORC dead, organized resistance disintegrated. Vikings hunted survivors while laughing beneath the setting sun. Ragnar's axe split shields and owners together. Kobe fought with special enthusiasm after his humiliating arena lesson. Every kill pushed the new recruits deeper into system progression. The goblin sorcerer attempted to cast from behind his disposable followers. Cass found him through the chaos. One arrow ended both the spell and the sorcerer's command. Jackal warriors lost courage after seeing their chief flattened. They scattered, only to discover Vikings were faster than expected. The entire assault collapsed within minutes. Luren dragged the greatsword behind him while returning toward the caravan. The attack had barely qualified as a warm-up, yet the battlefield revealed the territory's greatest weakness. Pressbog needed people more urgently than it needed another powerful fighter. 40 warriors could cross wilderness, but could not build a functioning domain. Territory required farmers, workers, scouts, craftsmen, soldiers, and families. Without population, Luren merely owned extremely dangerous empty land. That problem explained the purchase of the Mastiff captives. Beast folk could survive harsh conditions that defeated ordinary settlers. Luren next examined the battlefield for useful survivors. Many goblins had dropped weapons and collapsed in surrender. Their species was weak, cowardly, hungry, and remarkably numerous. Those disadvantages also made them inexpensive potential labor. Bodies, even small green bodies, remained valuable on an empty frontier. Marco approached with a report about weapons and captured equipment. Luren asked whether everything useful had been collected. Marco confirmed the axes, armor, and metal had been gathered. Luren stood and kicked him in irritation. The question had included enemy bodies, not merely enemy possessions. Marco stared toward the corpses and slowly understood. Luren identified the dead natives as food for captured goblins. He had no intention of wasting valuable human rations on them. Marco's face cycled through horror, resignation, and professional obedience. Slaves received orders to collect the battlefield's dead. The sound of vomiting spread through the camp. Luren placed a chair beside the kneeling goblin prisoners. An ancient goblin sorcerer named Nick became their spokesman. The old creature possessed enough intelligence to recognize absolute defeat. Luren ordered him to give every captive a name. System registration required individual identity and willing acceptance. Nick began with respectable names such as Iron, Hammer, and Stone. Inspiration quickly deteriorated into Mushroom Head, Shiny, and Gurgle. Eventually, desperation produced names based on nearby objects and bodily features. Luren found the process more entertaining than most theater. 50 goblins received names before Nick's creativity nearly collapsed. Each prisoner then faced a simple choice: join Luren willingly or remain outside his protection. Nick delivered an emotional speech about the mercy of their powerful conqueror. The speech carefully avoided mentioning that refusal might be fatal. Goblins pressed bloody thumbprints into the false oath book. Luren approved their party requests one after another. Statistics appeared, revealing weak levels and painfully low abilities. Still, even weak workers could gather wood, dig trenches, and carry stone. Their advancement tree contained far more stages than the human system. Goblins could become hunters, warriors, sorcerers, champions, and stranger specialized classes. Nick's magical potential made him especially useful. Luren appointed him leader of the goblin group. Authority increased the old sorcerer's loyalty and system status. Several injured goblins tried crawling away during the confusion. Luren personally stopped them and broke their legs. The others watched while learning what rejection truly meant. Healing magic later prevented death without removing the lesson. Luren explained that wounds could heal, but disobedience would not be forgotten. His recruitment strategy combined blood magic theater with practical terror. After the goblins, the 20 Mastiff folk received their turn. They stood unchained, but surrounded by armed Vikings. A broad, middle-aged Mastiff stepped forward as representative. He offered loyalty and military service under one condition. The Mastiffs wished to avoid fighting other beast folk. They would defend humans, kill monsters, and die for Pressbog. But spilling the blood of their own peoples felt unacceptable. Luren answered with a cold, deliberate laugh. Loyalty containing convenient exceptions was not loyalty. Anyone joining him would fight whichever enemy threatened the territory. Species, tribe, history, and sentiment would not overrule command. The spokesman argued that beast folk had already persecuted Mastiffs for generations. Luren used that truth against him. Those tribes had enslaved, sold, and abandoned them. Calling such enemies brothers only extended their power. Pressbog could become the Mastiff's new tribe, but membership required placing the new tribe first. Luren offered food, weapons, families, advancement, and protection. In exchange, he demanded complete obedience. The Mastiffs looked at Vikings, goblins, slaves, and battlefield corpses. They understood both the opportunity and the threat. One after another, all 20 pressed thumbprints into the Oathbook. Their system classes appeared as Mastiff, Warriors, and Hunters. Physical strength exceeded ordinary humans even before leveling. Luren appointed Ed to train them. This decision frightened the Mastiffs more than the earlier ultimatum. Ed smiled with the calm expression of someone imagining educational violence. He would teach them common commands, weapon use, and battlefield killing. Old Viking equipment became their first armor. Broken axes and scavenged weapons completed the inexpensive arrangement. Luren's followers searched bodies while goblins received their first meal. Some captives hesitated before eating former allies. Hunger eventually defeated cultural discomfort. The human slaves watched in horror from inside the wagon ring. They had now witnessed their new owner erase hundreds of attackers. They had also watched him recruit survivors through fear and opportunity. Escape suddenly appeared far less attractive. The caravan resumed its northward journey the following morning. Goblins marched under Nick's nervous supervision. Mastiff folk traveled beneath Ed's relentless observation. Vikings guarded the flanks and competed over recent kill counts. Luren rode near the center while calculating food consumption. Every additional follower accelerated the disappearance of supplies. Yet every follower also increased Pressbog's chance of surviving. Soon, another small native group approached the caravan. This time, Luren did not personally draw his sword. He sent the Vikings forward while Mastiffs observed. The attackers disappeared beneath axes within moments. System experience flowed into party members again. Several Vikings advanced levels during the skirmish. Their movements became faster, stronger, and more coordinated. They attributed every improvement to the legendary Oathbook. Luren encouraged that belief without correcting a single detail. Nick experimented with minor spells against fleeing enemies. His mana pool increased after several successful kills. Goblin loyalty rose whenever food and experience produced visible results. The Mastiffs remained more cautious. Ed therefore introduced them to practical combat education immediately. He selected captured enemies and demonstrated efficient killing angles. Hesitation earned kicks, insults, and repeated instruction. Luren watched without interfering. Compassion would not protect settlers once Pressbog faced organized invasion. Every new soldier needed to overcome reluctance before reaching the territory. Another attack came before sunset. Jackal people charged the rear while goblins approached from the front. Marco and Ragnar divided command without waiting for Luren. Ragnar's Vikings smashed the frontal assault. Marco intercepted the jackals with calm efficiency. His lance passed through enemies before they recognized the danger. The slaves watched from the wagons with much less panic than before. Repeated victory was quickly becoming normal. During the following days, the journey settled into a brutal routine. The caravan walked, ate, fought, rested, and repeated. Goblins, lizard folk, jackals, and dog-headed tribes attacked in rotating combinations. The wasteland offered extraordinary diversity among creatures trying to kill them. Initially, human slaves screamed and hid during every encounter. After several victories, they calmly watched from inside the formation. Battles became dinner entertainment rather than possible extinction. Some courageous male slaves requested permission to fight. Luren allowed selected volunteers to join the Oathbook. They received cheap weapons and positions beneath Ragnar's supervision. Every human life represented both future labor and money already spent. Ragnar therefore received strict orders to prevent unnecessary deaths. The volunteers gained experience far faster than ordinary frontier recruits. Small victories created confidence, loyalty, and visible physical improvement. Luren began building soldiers before reaching the land they would defend. Goblins adapted fastest because survival mattered more than pride. Nick organized them into work teams and combat groups. He proved cruel enough to maintain discipline. He also proved intelligent enough to copy effective human methods. Nick also feared Luren far too deeply to ever become lazy. The old goblin developed into an ideal middle manager. Mastiff folk improved more slowly because emotional resistance remained. Ed destroyed that hesitation through relentless training. He forced them to attack enemies who resembled neighboring beast tribes. Every successful kill weakened their old sense of forbidden loyalty. Vikings treated the entire journey as an extended hunting festival. Their new equipment survived punishment that destroyed previous weapons. Throwing axes frequently ended attacks before melee began. Ragnar continued advancing ahead of the others. Kobe trained obsessively after becoming Luren's arena victim. His loyalty increased each time the system rewarded effort. The rock-armored camels remained calm throughout every ambush. Arrows bounced from their plates or vanished among cargo. Children eventually slept through battles occurring beside the wagon circle. Luren appreciated the animals more with every passing mile. Their enormous appetites remained surprisingly manageable. Dried grass surrounding the route provided nearly unlimited feed. Water stored inside their bodies protected the caravan from dry stretches. Without them, supplies and dependence would have slowed travel disastrously. The purchased animals had emptied Luren's treasury, but saved the expedition. Several defeated tribes left behind prisoners. Luren accepted useful captives whenever food supplies allowed. Anyone willing to swear loyalty received consideration. Anyone pretending obedience faced Nick's talent for identifying cowardly lies. System loyalty measurements gave Luren final confirmation. No conventional lord possessed such precise knowledge of every subordinate. Betrayal became difficult when intention appeared as visible numbers. Luren guarded the secret more carefully than any treasure. Even Marco and Ragnar knew only that the oath book caused growth. They never saw the interface guiding every promotion. Luren occasionally reviewed the statistics of his original soldiers. Marco remained the strongest subordinate by a considerable margin. He had begun as an ordinary farm boy inside the Southern Legion. No noble blood, rare talent, or influential family protected him. Recruiters sent him to Drambo because nobody important would mourn him. Luren was already a corporal when the terrified recruit arrived. Survival had made Luren the outpost's most experienced low-ranking soldier. He noticed Marco's discipline beneath the fear. Training and system experience gradually transformed the farm boy. Marco advanced from soldier to knight, then master knight. His current level placed him far beyond ordinary aura users. Yet he remained quiet, gentle, and devoted to horses. Most enemies mistook him for an unremarkable armored guard. Ragnar openly admitted that he could not defeat Marco. Such honesty from a double berserker revealed the knight's true danger. Tom represented a completely different type of threat. He moved through grass and darkness without leaving signs. His assassin path emphasized speed, stealth, and precise dagger attacks. Loyalty to Luren stood at nearly absolute levels. Tom rarely used more words than necessary. That silence made unexpected appearances even more unsettling. Cass served as the company's long-range executioner. His bow proficiency allowed impossible accuracy across hundreds of meters. Moving targets, narrow armor gaps, and poor weather barely affected him. Ed fought with twin blades and an instructor's cruelty. Together, the original four formed the expedition's hidden foundation. Vikings provided visible intimidation, while these veterans supplied precision. The caravan continued, winning every daily encounter, until Marco approached Luren with a warning that changed the entire situation. Something about the attacks felt wrong. Even the stupidest tribes should have learned to avoid them. Yet enemies appeared once or twice every day. Most groups contained only 100 or 200 weak fighters. They charged fiercely, lost several warriors, and fled with surprising speed. No serious half-ORC units or powerful champions accompanied them. The pattern resembled deliberate testing rather than ordinary robbery. Somebody was throwing expendable tribes against the caravan. Each attack revealed formation, weapons, reactions, and command structure. Luren ordered Tom and Ed to track retreating survivors. Scouts soon discovered messengers carrying reports deeper into the wasteland. That was when Luren realized the daily attacks were reconnaissance conducted with disposable lives. A larger enemy was gathering information before committing real strength. Luren increased night watches and changed travel patterns. Wagons no longer camped in identical formations each evening. Cass occupied elevated positions whenever terrain allowed. Tom placed hidden alarms along likely approach routes. Marco kept horses saddled during periods of greatest danger. Ragnar ordered Vikings to sleep beside weapons. Nick threatened goblins who complained about additional guard duty. The mastiffs received permanent responsibility for the livestock perimeter. Luren deliberately allowed scouts to observe some preparations. Misleading an enemy required controlling what information they believed they discovered. He displayed nervous movement around the wagons. Meanwhile, his strongest fighters remained hidden or appeared inactive. Marco continued feeding horses like an ordinary servant. Tom disappeared completely from visible camp routines. Cass practiced from distances enemy observers could not accurately judge. Ragnar behaved loudly enough to appear like the only major threat. The system party quietly accumulated strength with every minor engagement. But then, the scouts finally identified the force hunting them through the wasteland. The enemy belonged to the faction commonly called Bloody. Their true name was Blood of Ura. Centuries earlier, the Ura people had controlled a significant regional kingdom. Imperial expansion eventually destroyed that civilization. Survivors scattered across hostile lands and carried their hatred through generations. The largest remnant fled into the Jewel Wasteland. There, they rebuilt themselves as an organized half-ORC war tribe. Blood of Ura attacked human caravans with exceptional brutality. Almost no witnesses survived their raids. Merchants therefore spoke the name Bloody with genuine fear. Cass had listed them among the Wasteland's most dangerous factions. Now that faction was moving directly toward Luren. Tom returned with an expression suggesting overwhelming trouble. Approximately 600 expendable natives formed the enemy's first mass. Goblins, jackals, lizard folk, and dog-headed warriors filled those ranks. Behind them marched 400 disciplined half-ORC infantry. These soldiers carried proper armor, iron weapons, shields, and organized supplies. Their steps remained synchronized across rows 50 warriors wide. This was no hungry tribal mob chasing easy loot. It was a military force using natives as living shields. Luren understood that earlier attacks had measured his defenses. Blood of Ura believed they now knew enough to destroy the caravan. The enemy commander was a scarred half-ORC named Mark. His officers expected numerical superiority to overwhelm the small human force. Their strategy relied on waves, arrows, cavalry, and disciplined pressure. 600 natives would exhaust the defenders first. 400 elite infantry would then crush whatever remained. Jackal cavalry waited to strike weak flanks and non-combatants. Half-ORC archers could attack without caring about allied native casualties. Mark believed revenge would also restore fear surrounding his tribe. Members of Blood of Ura had died during Luren's first battle. Those 30 half-ORCs had apparently been children of the greater faction. Their deaths transformed a random caravan into a target for vengeance. Luren did not yet know that connection. He only knew an organized army approached through the grass. The caravan formed its wagon fortress before the enemy appeared. Non-combatants moved into the center with practiced speed. Fear remained, but repeated drills prevented panic. Goblins and mastiff folk formed a second defensive line. Vikings stood ahead of them with axes resting against shoulders. Marco remained mounted near the central opening. Cass positioned himself upon a rock-armored camel. Tom disappeared to observe enemy movements from the flank. Ed joined the mastiffs and prepared his twin blades. Luren walked beyond the wagons, carrying his massive greatsword. 1,000 enemies spread across the wasteland before him. Dust rose above their formation beneath the afternoon light. Native warriors screamed, while half-ORCs remained silent. The contrast revealed exactly who controlled the army. Ragnar grinned and asked whether the Vikings could finally stop holding back. Luren granted permission, but ordered them to preserve their expensive equipment. Kobe looked personally offended that money entered the discussion. Luren reminded him that every axe had cost 25 gold. Weapons could become more precious than soldiers when the treasury was emptied. The enemy drums began pounding. 600 natives surged forward in a disorganized wall. Blood of Ura infantry advanced behind them at a measured pace. Luren ordered the Vikings to charge immediately. Waiting would allow half-ORC archers to exploit the distance. Ragnar roared and led the axe line into the native mass. Luren accelerated beside them before moving far ahead. Goblin and Mastiff units remained near the wagons. Their task was stopping anything that escaped the front battle. Native fighters collided with the Vikings and disappeared beneath steel. Double-bladed axes opened bodies and shattered crude shields. Ragnar moved like a siege engine wearing human skin. Kobe swung with excessive enthusiasm while shouting his own name. Several new Vikings entered berserker rage almost simultaneously. Their bodies expanded while dark red spread across exposed skin. The sight frightened enemies who had expected ordinary mercenaries. Luren drove directly toward the organized half-ORC formation. Every native blocking him received one devastating strike. He refused to waste time on targets offering little strategic value. Mark recognized the threat and ordered the infantry wings forward. Both sides began curling inward to surround Luren. Shield-bearers compressed ranks while spears extended through narrow openings. Their intention was to trap him beneath bodies and continuous pressure. Luren attacked the center before the wings could close. His greatsword split paired shields with a single descending blow. The half-orcs behind them collapsed beneath the same impact. Spears targeted his legs from several angles. Luren jumped, landed on their shafts, and shattered the formation. One kick broke a spearman's face during the descent. Mark's strategy required Luren to slow down. Luren had no intention of cooperating. Every swing added another armored body to the growing pile. Half-orcs attempted to trade lives for exhaustion. The plan failed because Luren was not becoming exhausted. He was enjoying the challenge far too much. Their weapons could not break his skin. Unfortunately, every impact still produced completely unnecessary pain. Swords, spearheads, and shields struck from all directions. His clothes tore into increasingly embarrassing ribbons. Luren became angrier about the ruined clothing than the attempted murder. Mark ordered more soldiers to compress around him. The half-orc commander believed enough bodies could bury any monster. Then Ragnar crashed through the formation from behind. The giant Viking leaped over 2 soldiers and landed on a third. His boot crushed armor, while his axe removed 2 nearby heads. Ragnar skidded to a stop beside Luren. He examined the Baron's shredded clothing and began laughing. Luren promised severe punishment if another sound escaped him. Ragnar immediately redirected his laughter toward the half-orcs. Together, they turned the center into a storm of steel. Mark responded by ordering his archers to fire. Arrows rose from behind the infantry and darkened the sky. They fell upon natives, Vikings, and half-orcs, without distinction. Blood of Ura considered allied casualties acceptable. The barrage forced several Vikings to cover faces and eyes. Luren's earlier decision to charge had limited the archers' opportunity. Had the Vikings remained at range, the volleys would have been devastating. Melee now mixed every faction too tightly for clean shooting. Mark cared little about clean shooting, and suddenly 50 jackal riders burst from both flanks. Half charged toward the goblins. The others targeted mastiffs and wagons on the opposite side. The attack created 2 separate crises at once. Archers pinned the Vikings while cavalry threatened the rear line. Native survivors also continued pressing against the wagon defenses. Mark's army displayed real battlefield coordination. Luren ordered Marco to intercept the cavalry. He would personally deal with the archers. Marco answered by turning his horse without speaking. Red battle aura ignited around rider, lance, and mount. He charged toward 25 jackal riders on the left. Cass began shooting toward cavalry approaching from the opposite side. Each arrow targeted eyes, throats, or exposed joints. Tom appeared near the half-orc rear formation. His daggers silently removed sentries protecting the archers. Luren broke free from the infantry and sprinted toward the bowmen. Half-orcs tried closing the gap behind him. That was when Ragnar entered a deeper berserker transformation and blocked the entire pursuit alone. His already enormous body expanded further. Glowing runes appeared across crimson skin. The spirit berserker form raised him nearly 12 feet tall. Half-orcs froze when the living giant turned toward them. Ragnar's roar pushed dust away from his feet. Then he struck the formation like a falling mountain. Bodies flew in every direction. Kobe watched his captain transform and attempted to imitate the process. Rage flooded him beyond his previous limit. System experience and loyalty forced open a new advancement. Kobe entered his first true berserker form. He screamed with joy and immediately lost all financial responsibility. His axe disappeared somewhere during the charge. Kobe began tearing enemies apart with bare hands. Chainmail ripped beneath his swelling body. Luren noticed both pieces of destroyed equipment from across the battlefield. The sight injured him more deeply than any half-orc weapon. 25 gold for the axe and far more for the armor vanished together. Still, there was no time to conduct an accounting execution. Luren reached the archers before they prepared another full volley. His greatsword swept through the first rank. Bows, bodies, and quivers broke beneath the same strike. Tom moved behind survivors and cut escape routes. Archers attempted to draw short blades. Their hands were faster than ordinary soldiers, but slower than Luren. A second swing erased the remaining formation. With the barrage ended, Vikings regained full momentum. Marco met the left cavalry wing at maximum speed. His aura-covered lance passed through the first rider and mount together. The next impact launched a jackal warrior from the saddle. Marco moved through the unit like a red comet. Riders attempted to surround him and discovered they were being hunted. His horse turned faster, accelerated harder, and ignored battlefield terror. Marco chased enemies who tried reaching the wagon line. The cavalry formation disintegrated beneath precise repeated charges. On the opposite flank, Ed intercepted several riders reaching the goblins. His first blade opened a jackal's throat. The second removed half the rider's head. Another attacker swung a curved sword toward him. Ed crossed both blades and caught the strike. He rolled beneath the mount, stabbed its belly, and severed the rider's leg. The falling half-orc received a blade through the heart. Ed killed another before Marco arrived from the opposite side. Together, they ended the remaining mounted threat. The goblin line had nearly collapsed before their arrival. Native warriors considered goblins the weakest prey on the wasteland. Nick exhausted his mana while casting every spell he knew. The old sorcerer positioned himself as far from danger as possible. 5 bodyguards surrounded him after repeated near-death experiences. 2 riders still slipped through the confused defensive line. Nick's guards intercepted one and were scattered. The second charged directly toward the exhausted sorcerer. Nick attempted to stand, but numb legs folded beneath him. He faced death because he had been sitting too long. An arrow passed over his shoulder and pierced the rider's throat. A second arrow struck the jackal mount through the skull. Rider and beast slid to a stop at Nick's feet. Cass had fired from the back of an armored camel. The distance should have made such accuracy impossible. Nick stared at the corpses and reconsidered. Everyone serving Luren. Marco had destroyed an entire cavalry wing. Ed eliminated mounted warriors in seconds. Ragnar had become a glowing demigod. Cass could kill from beyond any normal response range. All of them obeyed Luren without hesitation. Nick wondered what kind of monster could command such monsters. His loyalty rose. Another point. Marco soon approached on a horse covered in enemy blood. He apologized for failing to stop every rider in time. The gentle tone contrasted absurdly with the surrounding massacre. Nick insisted that everything was completely fine. With Marco entering the rear, battle resistance ended rapidly. His lance moved through native warriors like a blade through grass. Red aura left a trail of bodies behind every charge. Marco impaled a lizard tribal chief and lifted him overhead. Seeing the corpse broke the remaining coalition's courage. Weapons dropped while survivors fled or surrendered. The mastiff folk stopped and gathered together, breathing heavily. Goblins, however, had never learned the meaning of mercy. They chased fleeing enemies with gleeful cruelty. Wild goblins who surrendered received limited species-based restraint. Other races received knives, laughter, and no sympathy. Their violence nearly became uncontrolled slaughter. Ed kicked one attacker away from a surrendered prisoner. He roared that surrender meant the killing stopped. Luren's goblins obeyed because disobeying Ed appeared suicidal. They redirected aggression toward enemies still attempting to flee. Goblin logic remained technically compliant and morally horrifying. At the front, Luren returned to crushing half-orc infantry. Standard soldiers disappeared beneath his greatsword one after another. Ragnar became the true spectacle of the battle. The 12-foot spirit berserker finally reached Commander Mark. Mark rode an oversized war jackal protected by armor. Ragnar's axe descended onto the animal's skull. The head split apart, and the mount collapsed instantly. Mark attempted to attack while falling. Ragnar's fist struck his chest plate like a meteor. Metal shattered beneath the first punch. The second launched Mark through the air. He flipped once and crashed into the dirt. Ragnar stepped onto the commander's chest. The gesture announced complete defeat without requiring language. Half-orc soldiers saw their commander transformed into a footrest. The remaining formation immediately began disintegrating. Some warriors continued fighting through stubborn pride. Laughing Vikings cut those soldiers apart. Others attempted to escape into the grass. Half-orcs possessed strength, but lacked the speed required for successful flight. Vikings pursued them with axes flashing beneath the sun. Only a small number escaped the battlefield. Hundreds of corpses covered the ground. Luren approached Ragnar and examined the commander under his foot. Ragnar proudly announced that the captive remained alive. He claimed to have held back. Luren crouched while Ragnar removed his enormous boot. Mark stared at the sky with an empty expression. 400 elite warriors had been destroyed by a few dozen humans. The feared blood of Ura had lost its revenge army. Mark could no longer move even one finger. Luren asked whether he understood the common language. A slight movement of the eyes provided sufficient confirmation. Luren questioned the reason for the attack. These soldiers were too organized to be ordinary hungry raiders. Their numbers also failed to match the available information. If they knew Luren's strength, the army had been too small. If they knew nothing, it had been unnecessarily large. Mark rasped that the attack was revenge. Luren initially considered enemies from his southern military service. Tracking him across the empire seemed excessive, even for half ORC grudges. Mark explained that the earlier dead patrol belonged to Blood of Ura. The 30 half ORCs killed during the first ambush were their brothers. The faction had come to avenge those deaths. Luren finally understood how random violence had attracted a major enemy. The first commander whose chest he crushed had possessed powerful connections. Accidentally, killing important people appeared common in every world. Luren asked for more information about the greater tribe. Mark promised that Blood of Ura would continue seeking vengeance. Despair beneath the threat revealed that he doubted eventual victory. Even the tribe's strongest warrior might fail against Luren's company. Luren ended the interrogation rather than expose his ignorance. He still lacked enough knowledge to ask intelligent political questions. Mark had fought bravely and never begged for mercy. Luren respected genuine warriors, even when they were enemies. He took Mark's curved blade from the ground. One quick strike granted the commander a clean death. Future conversations with Blood of Ura would be conducted through greatswords. Afterward, Luren ordered the caravan to rest and reorganize. Nick immediately began describing every moment he had almost died. The goblin expanded the count until it reached 17 separate disasters. Luren listened only partially. Tom appeared beside him without warning, but then Tom revealed another half ORC force traveling only 1 day's march to the west. Around 100 infantry guarded approximately 50 jackal riders. More than 30 heavy wagons moved slowly beneath their protection. Luren sat upright as the strategic picture changed. Tom had tracked Mark's trail backward during the battle. Deep wagon ruts revealed a large convoy separated from the attack force. Blood of Ura had not originally traveled solely for revenge. They were escorting valuable goods toward another destination. Mark had discovered evidence of his dead comrades and divided the army. 400 soldiers attacked Luren, while the remainder continued guarding cargo. The vengeance mission had been an emotional detour. Therefore, the convoy probably knew nothing about the recent defeat. 30 heavy wagons suggested extremely valuable merchandise. Luren remembered that his treasury contained almost nothing. Weapons, slaves, supplies, camels, and gnome accessories had consumed everything. Fate had now placed a fully loaded convoy within striking distance. Its guards still expected Mark to return victorious. Speed would prevent them from learning the truth or escaping. Luren selected Marco, Tom, and Cass for the raid. Ragnar remained behind to protect the caravan and prisoners. Luren announced that the 4 veterans were going shopping. Tom was a level 36 master assassin. His dagger proficiency exceeded every other weapon skill in the company. He could kill with almost any small blade. Victims might die believing they had simply fallen. Cass was a level 38 marksman. His longbow and crossbow proficiency approached legendary precision. He could strike a fly from a horse's ear at 300 meters. Marco remained the company's strongest direct combatant. His Master Knight advancement concealed power behind quiet behavior. These 3 formed Luren's ideal raiding team. 4 riders would challenge 150 soldiers and seize 30 wagons. Luren considered the odds extremely favorable. They mounted and rode hard toward the convoy. Far ahead, the enemy commander sensed approaching danger. His name was Margosh. He was considered the strongest warrior within Blood of Ura. Decades of wasteland warfare had sharpened his survival instincts. Those instincts now warned that something was terribly wrong. Margosh inspected the horizon. Wagons, riders, and infantry. Everything appeared orderly. 50 jackal cavalry patrolled around the slow supply column. 100 half ORC infantry guarded the wagons. Margosh considered whether I planned betrayal. Blood of Ura had traded with that bandit lord before. Arguments and occasional violence were normal parts of their negotiations. Complete betrayal would damage profitable routes and future business. Margosh dismissed the possibility. For one moment, he wondered about the human caravan Mark had attacked. Then he laughed at his own concern. Several dozen humans could not defeat 400 elite warriors. Mark also commanded 600 native auxiliaries. Margosh assumed the delay resulted from celebration after an easy victory. In reality, Mark already lay dead beneath the afternoon sun. The convoy carried years of accumulated tribal wealth. Blood of Ura planned to exchange it for food, weapons, and armor. Successful trade could feed more families and equip additional soldiers. The tribe dreamed of rebuilding ancient Ura power within the wasteland. It was a noble dream, traveling through the wrong neighborhood. Margaush muttered impatiently about Mark's absence, until 3 dark points appeared along the distant horizon. 3 riders approached at extraordinary speed. Margaush narrowed his eyes until the shapes resolved into humans. By then, Cass had already released the first arrow. Margaush moved his head through pure battlefield instinct. The arrow grazed his cheek instead of entering his brain. It missed death by only a few centimeters. The wagon driver behind him received the full strike. The shaft passed through his chest and pinned him to the cargo box. Cass had fired accurately from roughly 300 meters. His opening shot nearly killed the wasteland's strongest blood of Euro warrior. Margaush roared and ordered immediate defensive formation. Half ORC infantry rushed around the wagons. 50 jackal riders turned and charged toward the approaching humans. They expected to overwhelm 3 mounted attackers through speed and numbers. Cass stopped his horse instead of retreating. He calmly drew another arrow. The second shot entered a jackal rider's throat. A third struck through an exposed eye. A fourth found the narrow gap beneath a helmet. Cass fired with mechanical consistency. Every release produced another falling rider. 1 shot brought 1 death. The rhythm became almost musical. Jackal cavalry began dropping before reaching effective distance. Marco did not slow or stop. Red battle ore covered his armor, horse, and lance. He accelerated directly toward the center of the cavalry formation. The first rider attempted to turn aside. Marco's lance struck before the maneuver finished. Jackal and rider separated violently beneath the impact. The second attacker swung a curved blade from the right. Marco lowered his shoulder and passed beneath the strike. His lance swept horizontally and removed the rider from the saddle. Another jackal leaped toward the horse's neck. Marco changed direction with impossible precision. The attacking beast landed where the horse had been. Cass's next arrow entered its skull. Marco continued through the disorganized riders. Left, right, and left again. His lance cleared a path. Enemies flew from their mounts like debris in a storm. The cavalry attempted to spread and surround him. Cass punished every rider moving toward Marco's blind side. Throats opened before warning cries could escape. Margaush watched his mobile force disappear with terrifying speed. These were not ordinary human scouts. Marco resembled a blood-red comet moving through mounted warriors. Cass operated like a distant execution machine. Tom was nowhere visible. That absence frightened Margaush more than the fighters. He could see. Luren continued riding behind Marco with the greatsword across one shoulder. He studied infantry positions rather than wasting effort on cavalry. The wagons were the prize. Margaush and his half ORCs were obstacles surrounding that prize. Several riders broke from combat and charged directly toward Cass. Cass remained still and released 2 arrows in rapid succession. The first rider fell backward with the shaft through the mouth. The second lost control after his mount's eye disappeared. Marco reached the remaining cluster before they could regroup. His aura-covered lance cut across 3 saddles in one pass. Riders struck the ground, while their jackals scattered. Margaush ordered infantry archers to support the cavalry. No arrows came, and Margaush had no idea why. Tom had already reached the rear bowman. One archer collapsed with a dagger beneath the ribs. Another turned and received a blade through the throat. Tom moved between wagons, bodies, and shadows without sound. By the time soldiers noticed him, several officers were dead. Conflicting orders spread through the defensive formation. Margaush demanded shields around the cargo. Half the infantry moved while the other half searched for Tom. The hesitation opened exactly the gap Luren needed. He kicked his horse forward and accelerated toward the convoy. Margaush drew a massive curved sword and moved to intercept. Blood of Ura's strongest warrior finally faced the approaching Baron. Behind them, Cass released another perfectly measured shot. The arrow struck a fleeing rider between the shoulder blades. Marco turned sharply and entered the cavalry formation again. Only a fraction of the original 50 remained mounted. Those survivors had lost formation, confidence, and any path of escape. Some attempted to flee toward the open wasteland. Cass methodically removed them before they reached safety. Others charged Marco from desperation. His lance swept them aside with brutal efficiency. Jackal mounts screamed and scattered between the wagons. Half ORC infantry struggled to avoid their own panicked animals. Margaush realized the escort had lost its greatest tactical advantage. Cavalry was supposed to control distance and movement. Instead, 3 humans had turned it into collapsing chaos. Marco passed through the final organized group with aura blazing. Cass's last arrow struck the only rider still holding formation. The survivor fell, and his jackal fled without looking back. In moments, 50 mounted warriors had been reduced to corpses and stragglers. Margaush had barely recovered from the opening arrow, yet his entire cavalry screen had already vanished before his eyes. The blood of Yura convoy now stood exposed before Luren's advancing blade.